on this computer. Okay, there we go. Right, so we've started recording now, and we're going through the topics. This is for Vini's benefit. We're going through the topics. So from the beginning, there we go, and back to sharing the screen. And
Claire, for your evening meal.
Hang on 2 seconds on it.
Sorry.
there we go. Right, yes. So yes, we were on vegetable growing. There was the last we talked about. Growing dahlias. Is there any experts in growing dahlias in the group that we could? Well, but clearly there's some interest in that. Vertical gardening. Now there's an interesting topic. I imagine that's perhaps a wall, and just I imagine that could become quite challenging. Irrigating in particular, and pruning and the like.
In this part of the world, irrigating isn't as big a problem as it is elsewhere, you know.
Yeah, we saw a beautiful house in France some years ago. It was on 3 floors, and each floor had an external area with a wall, and they had plants growing in that, and it looked absolutely marvelous. Medicinal plants and herbs, that could be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
For us elderly, wouldn't actually say that. For us in the third age. Natural control of pests. I wonder if there's anything for squirrels, because we're plagued with that. And cats, yes. And cats, indeed. Color zoning. So I imagine that would be different parts of the garden having contrasting colors. Gardening near the coast, which is the challenge of salt air and how it affects things, different plants, etc. And then quizzes. It's very easy to run a quiz, and it's a bit of fun. And now that we've got the hybrid meeting, we can do it both ways. I can put the questions up here, and it would be a bit of fun. So if anybody would like
feedback from this report also leads to what quiz questions might be useful. Things like that.
Yeah, we have had most years. We have had a quiz of some sort at one of our meetings.
Sorry. Yeah, somebody trying to enter the room here. It's no, is it locked?
Could you put a blind there, please?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
There.
Yeah, because you're right in this.
Looking at
Cards down.
Yeah. There we go.
That's it. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, on to the next topic. We're on to the next slide, if I can get this to work. Ideas for outings in the summer. Montalto State Ballyhinch.
It's a long way.
And if we were to do that, Claire, would it be a case of hiring a bus? Do you think?
Oh, I don't know. One of Ken Canavan's trips went there. I mean, it's nice, but garden-wise, it's a nice house, but it was a half day, less than half a day. It's a long way, and I wouldn't have thought it was worth it, to be honest. And to be honest, we don't usually hire buses. We're much more of a do-it-yourself group.
Okay. That would keep the cost down, and so be car sharing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Next then is viewing allotments. Are there allotments in this area?
I don't know any.
There are allotments in Castle Rock.
Castle Rock.
Oh, right.
National Trust have a few allotments.
Right.
Small allotments.
Right. Okay.
Which are quite good.
Right. So we get some of those people maintaining their allotments to talk about their allotments.
You could tie that in with doing the apples up at downhill.
That's true.
Yeah. Good point.
No, I mean I work with up the downhill, and they have the apples. They're trying to gather up all the old species of apples.
Yes.
In the and plant them out.
Oh, really? Yeah, that would be interesting. If we went in the autumn months, then we taste her as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Loretto has an allotment at Heslett. You know, Loretta Blackwood, she has an allotment there.
Right. Yeah. Oakfield Raffo. I'm not familiar with that either, Claire. Do you?
It looks very interesting, and it's a place I've considered in the past and just never quite got round to. So yes, I think that might well be a possible.
To say something about Oakfield, Saturday is the only day that the train runs. They've got the little train round the place.
Oh,
Right.
Oh, right. Okay. So you're keen
Good to know.
It's a very interesting story about Oakfield. The guy who has developed and spent an awful lot of money on was Jerry Robinson, who grew up as a child down there and his family moved to London.
Right.
And he actually was the chairman of u3a at one time.
Oh, right.
He's
Yeah.
given employment to the whole area and has built amazing things. He
Yeah.
died at 73 years.
Oh, did he? He's an interesting man. He's management consultant and all
yes.
sorts of things that he
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
He was, yes.
And then Claire's, your wilderness in Donegal. How did you? That could maybe be tied in. Well, that would be nowhere near Raffo, would it?
No,
No.
it's near Dunfanaghy.
Dunfanaghy, of course, yes.
Isn't it back beyond?
Yeah.
It's
Still.
not even on the centre. The brambles back, and then I leave brambles to the back place.
Lovely. Yeah, I think, yeah, okay. And then Kate, your nephew's garden in Draperstown is a suggestion
Oh,
here.
no, it's not my nephew's garden, Drake's trying
That's the other Kate, that's Kate Dog.
it's not me.
That's
Oh.
Kate.
That's Kate Dog.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. I have no idea. That's what's listed here, so that's what I read.
It's a garden centre that Kate's grandson has set up. I mean, we could combine it with a visit to Mahara Garden Centre, probably too, if we were wanting to go down that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next then, Finboy and Drenna Wall Gardens. Drenna is the one in the Mavati, is it?
Yeah.
Gina. You think I would know I'm a Mavati man, but yeah. And Finboy,
Well,
right?
they've actually got a lovely new restaurant and so on in the Orangery. Apparently it's really,
All right.
it's very good.
That'd be a nice one. That'd be a good one. Yeah. Ben Varden again. Yeah, that's an nutrition's place. The last time I went there, my wife managed to fall. It was one of those slippery falls, and then we walked around. She was covered in mud, which is unfortunate. Now, Brockhammon Farm, is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, that's a goat farm.
A goat farm.
Yeah, but they also have gardens.
Is it possible to have goats and a garden?
Separately.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the moment, they have an amazing Halloween
All right.
pumpkins and all
Oh,
sorts.
I see.
And you can go and pick herbs and pick your own.
They have a nice cafe too.
Beautiful cafe. And
We have been there, but it is interesting.
Okay, good. And Rowan, I think that's or Rowan.
Don't ask me.
I think it's Rowan. Yeah, that's a nice spot too. Rowan. Yeah.
I think the lady was asking about the one before that, though, where it was. Was that right?
Yes. Where is Brockhammon?
Ballycastle direction.
yeah, it's going to Ballycastle.
Lovely. Portland on Bluebells, which would be a spring one then. Right. Be interesting. And Antrim Castle.
Mhm. Nice
Environmental.
garden.
Sorry, go ahead, Claire.
No, I'm just going to say Antrim Castle is a nice garden. Yeah.
Yeah.
Environmental sites. Now, is that a particular location or just a general suggestion? Do you know? Nobody here with that suggestion.
You could, click on got it so that we can see the screen better.
Oh, goodness, sorry about that. I hadn't realized.
Thanks.
There we go. Right, I didn't realize that was up there. I don't see that at this point. Okay, and another visitor. Moorbrook Lakes.
Yes, fantastic.
That's up.
That's ashes to gold.
It's just
Oh,
above the road.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been there a few times. They have a nice little cafe restaurant there.
Yeah.
It's worth a visit, and there are those lakes as well. Mussenden, that we all know, and it's obviously popular that we want to go back there. And National Trust Gardens.
There'll be a variety of gardens
Yeah.
throughout the north.
That'd be the gardens that are open throughout the summertime.
Featuring
Right gardens.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next then, the volunteering survey results. As you can see there, setting up and cleaning the room, plenty of volunteers, 15 members have volunteered for that. The tea and coffee rota, again, plenty of volunteers. Verna is doing that today. Where are you, Verna? Oh, sorry. And
From Carol, wherever she is over there.
right, okay. And donating plants, and magazines, etc. There are 10 who volunteered for that, so that's marvelous. Planning the program, nobody. Giving talks and presentations, nobody except Barney so far. And assisting with administration, 1. I think actually that's me. I'm doing all these things here. And then
And this is only one string to his bow.
Then there's the chairing of the meetings. Well, I mean, as you know, Claire has principally been doing this past number of years, and I know that Claire has indicated, Claire, is that right, that you are feeling it's time to stand down from that responsibility? And someone else should
Absolutely.
take it? And Beanie has stepped in for the moment and has said that she will do it in coming months, but not past Christmas. So we've got to deal with that issue, folks. There's no way around that, because without it, it doesn't happen. I'll just read this. We have a large membership. We have lots of great suggestions for topics and visits. We have a very willing panel of volunteers for the meetings, etc. Key points is there's nobody to chair the meeting, and that's the principal one. Nobody giving presentations at this point, and only one person giving the administration or planning the program. Can I go on to the next point?
I just wonder, as someone who's fairly new to actively involved in u3a, I just wonder if people know what is involved in chairing the meetings, because I think sometimes it can be something huge you don't want to say yes to in case you're really lumbered with something. But I just wonder if almost like a job description, these are the sort of things you'd be asked to do. I just wonder if that would be useful,
I mean, I think one of the most successful groups I'm involved with, and I'm involved with the management of it, is they have a management team, and they have one person who's like myself, who's really good at the technology, and in that case, that is me. They have another person then who is doing principally the secretarial, and when I say principally, it's very simple. It's just sending messages out to the members so that we're communicating with them. And that's not terribly difficult. We use Beacon principally. You don't have to use Beacon, but it's certainly easier to use Beacon. It's more secure when you're using Beacon, and you would be given training in using Beacon. I mean, I don't want to give the sense that because you need training, it's difficult. It's not. It really would take 5-10 minutes maximum to show you how to email the members securely. And then there's always one other person who helps. In the case of the astronomy group that I'm involved in, another person who helps with the planning and choosing speakers and coming up with ideas. So I would suggest that, it'd be great if we could have more than one person coming up here to help us with these topics. We need somebody to chair every meeting. I mean, it's not, I have so many other things on my plate at the moment that I can't possibly do, but I am going to be coming along and helping out with the technology side of things. But folks, I mean, realistically, if people don't come forward on this, the grip falls. I mean, you cannot run the grip without that. So I'm not sure how we're going to go ahead with this. Claire and Vinnie, have you had any thoughts? Are we going to have another survey of members saying, right, or are we going to contact people? What do you think?
I don't think we've thought it, any further than today yet.
Okay.
I mean, I would say the admin side of it is, as Brendan says, is very easy. And I am not averse to keeping that on for a while. The things I really feel I've planned the program. I mean, Ray Morrison did, not Ray McIntyre did it for a while, but I've planned the program. I'm absolutely all out of ideas. I don't want to do that. And at the minute, I can't walk far enough to chair the meeting, really. So I'm not averse to helping out in the ways that I can, but I certainly don't want to take a leading role. And it is, I think, planning the program that takes the time. The summer outings are not as difficult, strangely. As you can see, there's lots of suggestions, and we've always collaborated and car shared, and that's worked okay. But it is just getting the winter meetings set up and running. I don't even mind giving the occasional presentation, but I feel I've done a lot of that recently and probably plumbed the depths of my very shallow knowledge.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think we have to recognise your contribution over the years to this group. It is timely, and thank you for continuing to help with the administrative role. That'd be marvellous. As Claire says, I think we'll have to give a bit more thought, perhaps, as to how we get a chair and someone else to help out with the planning of things. We'll come back to that in future, if that's okay, Claire.
Yeah.
That's the end of that presentation that Vinnie prepared. So what I'll do now then, I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is gardening and environment group. So oops.
Yeah, we probably need to move reasonably quickly through this because there are quite a lot of slides, pictures.
Okay, right, fine. If I can find it. Yeah, it's 2:30 already. Okay, there we go. Some days it doesn't want to work. Welcome to our first meeting of the year, particularly to all new members. Please make yourselves known to each other. Okay,
this is my introduction. I would skip that till coffee time.
Members' photographs, gardens and places visited in the summer. Joe.
Okay. Joe, okay, unfortunately, now does Spanish on a Monday afternoon, so cannot be with us, but he has sent us 3 photos, and this is the one that I covered. This is apparently a Korean blue pine, which he has been growing, and he bought it because he thought the blue pine cones would look really good around Christmas with lights, etc. But apparently by Christmas they've all gone brown. So I do think it's an extremely pretty tree.
Yeah, he says here about that blue fir. He had one in my last garden, and in 50 years it grew about 5 feet and never once produced a blue corn. But he said the soil was heavy clay and maybe it didn't suit it. This tree, he says, is about 4 years old, is about 40 inches high, and is covered with cones. It is growing in a very sandy soil. I originally had planted it with intention of having blue cones for Christmas wreaths and being able to put Christmas lights on it. Neither will work as the cones opened in September to shed the seeds, and they are now brown. Right, an orchid. Right, Claire, do you want to speak about that?
I think these are in the wrong order. If you go on one, I think we get the other one first. Hi, this is one. you've got the information on this, I think, Brendan. This is taken at an exhibition. There's the orchid.
Yeah. Okay, it says here, this is just a bit of text that Joe sent me via Barbara, via Claire. Orchid, after Barbara explained how she had orchids in her lawn, I assume that's you, Barbara. After they stopped mowing, I saw unusual leaves in my lawn, and mowing around them, they turned out also to be orchids. The interesting thing about these two blooms is their size. They are 18 inches tall, huge for an orchid. They're also under the clothesline where I have a bird feeder, and the recycled peanuts guano means that the grass under the clothesline grows twice as fast as the grass elsewhere. And the orchids have obviously benefit too. Disproves the idea that orchids only grow in poor soil. Okay.
I'm like Barbara too. I've had orchids just appear in my grass in the last 2-3 years. One orchid, to be fair, nothing as grand as Joe's.
That's magnificent. It really is lovely.
That's why I do the green line of orchids.
It's beautiful. It really is. Okay, so then this is the one that he is marked as number 3.
Yes.
It says, I took this at the BBC Gardener's Word Show in Birmingham. It shows what you can do with a few plants and a bit of driftwood. Yeah, it's nice.
It's nice, yes.
Hey, so we'll push on, Claire. Joni. Right, Joni, do you want to talk about, there we go. Is this yours, Joni?
Not got there yet.
No. It's familiar. You sure it's mine?
It was marked Joni Reid, so.
Must be rhododendron.
Rhododendron, yeah, it looks like rhododendron. Quite a big display of rhododendron.
Good to, yeah.
Then next.
Yeah,
Also
that's-
Joni's.
That's my wasp nest.
Wasp nest?
Wasps.
Oh,
I had one grow, a big nest in the floor in my boiler room. How they got in there, and so I thought, smart me, that I would move it. I didn't want it in there, but I didn't want to kill them. So I tried to work to, with like a shovel to move them. Of course, they got very angry. So then I left. The next day, they were all gone.
oh, right,
Everybody had left.
right.
No eggs, no nothing there. So I took it and then I sprayed it with varnish. And now I've got nearly complete wasp nest.
Marvelous.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's something very different.
It's so amazing that, they can make that out
Yeah.
of their own paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you decided to keep it, Joni, right, trying to retain it because you felt what wasps contribute to them to your garden.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I even saw one time, aphids on my roses, and he peeled back one of the rose buds and ate the aphid underneath.
Yes, yeah.
It was wonderful. Yeah, so I never try to kill them,
No.
but he was right in the way, so then
We had wasps, they actually built a wee nest in a pot at our front door. And it was evident because they kept flying out. We were standing outside in the summer and they kept flying past us. We decided after looking, at first I was trying to get rid of them. And then when I looked into it, I realized that these wasps actually were going, as long as we weren't swiping at them, they didn't bother us at all. And so we left them. And they had that summer months in that nest. And then the following year, they'd gone elsewhere. So,
you just don't make them mad and then they'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
I find that, like shooing them, like as if they think there's a wind there.
yeah.
And then you can use something to shoo them, like a towel or something, and then they won't get mad.
My imagination never left.
That's the inside of the
I
nest.
think you're right.
You see like honeycombs.
Yeah. So that's another view of your wasp nest.
Yeah, there's honeycomb, basically.
Right.
where the eggs, I guess they were going to be, but there weren't any eggs there when I came back the next day. That's the inside.
Alex and Barbara and Alex, a Scottish visit, Calder Castle and Bretton House.
Has anyone ever been to Causeway Castle or Macbeth fame? It did happen, I think it was 1040s, there or thereabouts, but we were there in April, and as I say, it was more rhododendron and azalea time, and there was very, very pleasant walks, and it's got quite a good gift shop as well, and there's a bit of cafe there as well. It's well worth a visit. It's in Nairnshire, which is obviously quite close to near Inverness. Which is absolutely good as well.
Suddenly we're now in Causeway, which is the artist town in Scotland, in Dumfries and Galway. And this is the Broughton House Gallery and Garden, the National Trust property. And it's an 18th century townhouse which was owned by the artist E.A. Hornell. And he bought the house in 1901 and lived and painted there until his death. And he spent a year living in Japan and redesigned the garden with Japanese influences, not to look like a Japanese garden. And it's just a long, beautiful, narrow garden. You just approach in from the wall at the side. And at the bottom, it's looking down over the River Dee, and that's apparently where he used to love to sit and paint. So that's one of the, it's just one of our favourite gardens. And there's there are sort of very peaceful areas in it, and it's really was interested in the textures of the flowers, and that's basically what he painted, were flowers and textures and children. He was one of the first impressionists, so his whole garden was more or less like a painting.
I see they've got a scarecrow as well.
Yeah, I know. No, I was going to say Japanese Mandarin, but
Oh, pussycat.
and there's always a cat in the garden. We've been there over several years, and this one's called Tizzy, and she's exactly like a cat, apart from a wee bit on her nose that we had several years ago. And there's quite a bit of water and lovely structures. The ferns were just coming out as we were there in the beginning of May. And if you look at the patterns on the water, that's very like the type of paint he used. His paintings looked like that. So there are sort of stone steps, and that's the back of the gallery. The gallery is usually open. It was closed during COVID, but we have been through it years and years ago. And he has pots of tulips. Well, he doesn't, but the gardener does, obviously he's dead. There are lots of pots of tulips at different areas. I just thought that looked really dramatic when you have several big pots of flowers of the same colour. Places to sit just dotted around. Not a big garden at all. So that's as you walk in through the side entrance, and then walking up to the back of the garden.
Bird feeders, wow.
Now this isn't there. We're back now at Calder Castle. And if you're thinking of getting a bird feeder, this is the one.
Yes, beautiful.
Yes, it's fantastic. It's in the walled garden, and it was designed by a Danish-born sculptor, Ilona Maurice. And it's designed so that different foods can be put into each of the little sections round. So there were siskins on it, and there was a blackbird and chaffinches, you know, each all the way round. It was just absolutely
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, Vinny isn't here. So I have no information about these at all.
No.
Claire, would you know anything about these?
This is a Japanese anemone. That's pass, that's all I know. I mean, they're nice in the garden, Japanese anemones. I would,
Right.
yeah, keep going. I think I put names on them, and that was about the only information I have.
That's very lovely, but it's very invasive.
That's that wee daisy thing, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Great display. Shirley McDonald. Shirley here? Nope.
Shirley sent a very nice picture of hydrangeas, which you will see. And then if you go on to the next one, Daphne has a question about hydrangeas.
I think probably my best plan is to buy one that is definitely blue.
Well, I look.
You can get chemicals that will change them, but
The acidity of the soil, isn't it?
I don't know very much about it, but
Coffee ground.
Coffee ground.
Ken, we have to add this into it because my grandfather had a whole row, and if he left them, they went pink, but he couldn't have copper, I think he copper sulfate around the base of them,
right.
and that made them turn blue. He didn't like the red ones or the pink ones, so he wanted the blue ones.
The only thing is this
It's-
year, I have blue ones, but I find that they're going pink during their sort of fading to their autumn colours.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it was such a good summer with the big more pink.
Ah,
No, I don't remember him saying about the copper something or other.
Yeah.
It's the acidity of, I looked it up because
Yes.
the main
So-
thing seemed to be the acidity of the soil. If the soil is acid, you will get blue, and if it gets into the alkaline side, you will get pink or red. But obviously the variety that you buy is also a factor.
Quite. I mean, I had that if you put copper coal down at the roots, that's an old wives' remedy or tea. But-
Somebody has just joined the meeting. Yeah.
Perhaps I'd better just buy a true blue and keep encouraging it.
Yes.
Think the blues too.
This autumn leaves standing dried stems and seed heads for the birds. Dump them clean up.
mm,
Good point. All right, here's an example.
yeah.
Yes, I couldn't get all this on one slide, so I chopped it up. But there's an example of birds enjoying your seed heads, etc.
Yeah, lovely. Vernacular. Overwintering home for frogs and toads.
Yep, this was a new one to me, but apparently, again, if you go on one, there is an illustration. If you've got somewhere near a pond, if you sort of excavate and fill it with, oh, I was going to say builder's rubble, but you know, that sort of stones and sticks and everything else, and cover it over with soil and add some pipes so they can get in. It's a good overwintering place for, well, they say, whatever it is,
Yeah.
newts.
Newts,
Do we have newts, frogs and reptiles? Well, lizards maybe, but not obviously here, other reptiles.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And that's it.
the end of the slideshow, and the time is nearly 10 to 3. So I think now is an appropriate time to have a break. for tea, coffee, biscuits, buns, all the delights that are being brought here. That's marvelous. So it's, if we meet again, try and meet at 5 past, between 5 past and 10 past 3.
Okay.
Is that okay?
And what time is it finish?
Okay.
Yeah, cheers.
Okay, folks, if I can have your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention, please? Right, I'm going to introduce you here to Barry Williamson, and Barry is going to give us hopefully a fascinating talk.
Of course.
About bonsai.
It's good to be
Thank you very much, Barry. The floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you. Now, I've got some bonsai trees and I'm going to talk about those. But before I start, how many people here have or have had a bonsai tree? That's very common. So you can't hear. Is that any better? Can you hear me now any better?
Yes.
Good, okay. That's right. Some people say, I can't hear you, but I'm quite happy not to hear you. So, yeah, it's a common experience to have a bonsai tree, and that's what happens to them. But we'll talk about that. Anyone else have bonsai? Currently have a bonsai tree?
Yes.
Right. Oh, 2 azaleas. Oh, that's nice.
They were given to me.
Right, and your experience with them, how long have you had them?
And one of them has pink flowers and white flowers.
Right, azaleas are lovely, yes, indeed.
Present.
Okay,
I'm friends with the David who actually comes in.
Right.
But at the right time.
that's good. That's good. Yes, you do need that. All right, well, let me start off by saying, just very briefly, the history of bonsai goes back to even before China. It actually started off in India, where people wanted to put, there we are. Oh God, that's better.
Into the microphone.
Can you hear me over there now? Okay, all right. So I'll have to put it down from time to time. There you go. So in India, the horticulturalists were asked to put plants in pots so that they could move them around. And so they started to do that. And so one thing led to another. The Chinese emperors, they liked these trees. And they said, well, I want some of those. And since the Chinese emperors weren't always popular outside their castles, they said, well, we want you to bring them indoors. And so one thing led to another. The Chinese started to develop what they called penjing, And then the Japanese got it and became bonsai. And the word bonsai simply in Japanese means tree in a pot or plant in a pot even. So it's nothing very sophisticated. But the techniques are quite interesting. Everything that we do in bonsai, you do somewhere else in the garden. We fertilize, we put wire around the branches and things like that, that you would do with the espalier training of fruits, trees and things like that, and we prune, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take over these trees and I'm going to start talking about each of them in turn because each of them is slightly different. So forgive me while I put this down. Okay. Right. So this is a larch tree, a deciduous conifer. And I have removed most of the cones on it just to maintain its strength for this year, but normally it would have some cones on it and I would leave them on there. So this tree is about maybe 20 years old or so, and it will lose its leaves. As you can see, it's already starting to lose its leaves, and it will lose them all completely. It is a conifer, so if this was a pine, it would not lose its leaves. The leaves would remain there during the year. So that's a larch that will remain on my benches for all of the winter. One of the things, and this comes back to trees that we get in, say, Sainsbury's or something like that, or Mark garden centres. The trees that you get, the bonsai trees that you buy in garden centres are often indoor bonsai trees. And they're the most difficult to keep. Was yours an indoor bonsai tree? Yeah. They're the most difficult to keep because our central heating is lovely for us, but for a tree which needs moisture, it's not very useful at all, and it becomes a real problem. So you then have to start putting the pot into a tray full of water to keep your feet out of the water, but to keep the moisture around the tree moist. So indoor trees are very difficult. They're not impossible to keep, but they take a little bit of attending to. Most of my trees, I've got about 80 odd bonsai trees, but I've been doing it for, 50 years, something like that, 50 years, and I'm still only getting to know some of the information that I need to know. But, you know, it takes a certain amount of expertise, whatever way you're doing it. But outdoor trees are the most forgiving, if you put it that way. I've got, as I say, 80 trees. I don't keep them indoors, as you can imagine, because so I have them on a bench and they're getting the normal Northern Ireland weather. Most of them will appreciate that. They like moisture. But if you were growing the same trees in Japan, the trees in Japan would get 3 times the amount of growth than they would get here, because they've got heat and they would get moist by the Japanese gardener would keep moistening them, watering them every day. So you get 3 times as much growth in Japan as you would get here. Now, where you got to be careful, therefore, when you read a book by a Japanese master who says, this is what you do with your bonsai tree, be very, very careful, because they're getting 3 times as much growth as we are. Consequently, what they expect to get during a year is a lot less than we'll get. So just be careful when you read some books on bonsai and this is how to do it, etc. Look and see where the person who has written the book is writing it from. If it's European, that's not so bad, but if it's Japanese, oh, it's wonderful. There's some wonderful books on how to grow bonsai in Japan. But quite frankly, you need to be careful and know what you're doing when you read them. All right. Now, that tree, I'll talk about the treatment of that tree during a year. This is the dormant period, so there's not going to be very much that's done with that tree, except I will give it a feed for the end of the year. that will give it a boost in the springtime, in March time when it starts to put its growth on again. That will actually, that feed will feed the trunk of the tree and prepare it for springtime. Now, some people say, well, hang on a second, you want to keep these small? Yeah. Well, if you give them fertilizer, they'll grow. Yes. And then what you have is you get a plethora of new growth. So you could choose which of the new growth you want to keep and which you want to get rid of. So that's where your shape comes in, because I'll show you the second tree that I'm going to show you, which is a small elm tree. And it's a deciduous tree, but I'll explain something when I see that one. Okay. And please, any questions, ask me at any point in time, because once I get started, you can't shut me up, basically. Yeah. All right. Sorry, did I hear somebody say?
What do you feed them with?
Right. Normally I use particular feed from bonsai specialists, but you can even use chicken manure or any sort of feed, because basically what you're doing is trying to keep the bacteria in the soil. And the bacteria are advantageous, for the growth of the tree. So you're not trying to use something which is going to damage the bacteria in the tree. And there are certain fertilizers which would actually be damaging to the bacteria. So really, it's anything that's really natural, any fertilizer really, it's not a big deal, as long as you make sure that you don't, if you're using the dilution, make sure you under dilute rather than over dilute. So under dilute, but do it often, maybe once a month. That tree there during the year would have, as I say, started in March. It would have been fertilized in March. 4 or 5 weeks later, it would be fertilized again. Then another 5 or 6 weeks, it would be fertilized again. Then coming up to September or August, September, there's a slight dormant period. So you ease off the fertilizing then, and then you give the final feed of the year. So they're getting a lot of fertilizer, and so they're growing quite rapidly. Now, if I come to this tree, you can see, and I know it might be difficult for some people to see this tree. Now, and you can have a look at these afterwards if you want to, but here, what I've been working on is just to get the basic shape ready. But you can see that I'm going to talk about something called ramification. Now, ramification is a branch comes out, it splits into two, those branches split into two, those split into two, and so you get that very fine tracery of hair-like, almost hair-like branches on a tree this size. So this is where the main branches are. I'll be pruning, I'll not be pruning, sorry, I'll be wiring those in the new year just to get them in perfect position, something like that. And then I'll be feeding them to get that very fair, that very, very fine tracery of many, many, many branches. So that a branch like that, which is simply one at the moment, by the end of next year, will have split into two and two into four and four. So it should have about 8 little branchlets on that by the end of next year. So you can see that I think the structure of that tree is quite nice. This is not in a bonsai pot. These are some of the pots that I've made as landscape trays, because I wanted to make it look as natural as possible. So therefore, I have created these, and they will eventually be covered in moss. But it's only, that was only done this year, so the moss hasn't grown, but eventually that will cover in moss, because again, they'll be quite moist all the year round. So any questions so far?
Do you start them off as a seed?
If you have long enough life, yes. And it wasn't a good idea for me to do that, no. No, I mean, it is possible. but quite frankly, it's easier to start off with something that's already growing. Now, in your garden, you might have some trees. I don't know. Have you any trees? Okay. And as gardeners, do you know the concept of layering? Okay. Well, I'll show you. In fact, I'll do it just now. I'll show you something about layering because, as I say, you can do it by seeds, but it takes years and years. You know. So give me a second. Now this is a cotoneaster, as you can see. This is a cotoneaster. It's got nice little red berries, and it has flowers and what have you. That, if you had been looking at that 18 months ago, that would have still been on the tree in my garden. So by taking a layering, you know, it took about 6 months or so because cotoneasters are quite strong growers, right? Wouldn't happen with many other trees, but so I was able to take a layering of that, and after about 6 or 7 months, and I'll talk about how you might do that in bonsai terms, then you can take that as a full tree with a trunk that thick and all of that. You can just imagine how long it would take to get a trunk that thick by doing it from seed. We'd be talking about 20 years, something like that. So that's one way of getting a tree already. One of the things to remember is if you have a small tree, let's say you find a small tree in nature growing somewhere, and you want to turn it into a bonsai, or maybe you've got a small tree which is a bit small and puny, putting it into the garden, it will grow much faster. And so what you can do is let it grow for a few years in the garden and then cut it back. And you can get something like this, having done that. But the layering, how I take layerings is simply this. Let's say I was going to layer that tree. I would take a band of the bark, all the way around that, about an inch band, take it all the way around. I would scrape it absolutely to the bone because you don't want the communication between this part and this part at this point in time. So you're going to take all of that off. In fact, some will even scrape into the trunk, so the trunk has a curve like that, so that there's no way that the water is going to get naturally from there to there. Then you pack sphagnum moss around it, and then you wrap it with a clear plastic piece of plastic. You know. Now, what happens is the tree has to get the water from there to there, so it starts to send the water up into the sphagnum moss, and the tree here is looking for water, so it starts to put rootlets into the sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss, as we all know, is a really great way of, it's got so much health in it and health producing enzymes and what have you. So after about 6 to 8 months, sometimes if I'm a bit concerned, I'll leave it for a year. The roots from here will go into the sphagnum moss. Now, they're not roots in the full sense of the word. In other words, you've got to be very careful with them because they're like bean sprouts. They will break. They will break they're very rigid. So you would take the plastic off, and the reason you make it a clear plastic is you want to see some evidence that there's roots there to start off with. So once you see the roots, you know that you're ready for taking that top part of the tree and planting it. Now, the soil that we use, normally I use a soil called akadama, which is a Japanese soil. And it costs something like £20 for a bag that size. So it's expensive, and it's not the sort of thing you want to spending money on too early. But the alternative is, as long as you have got an open mixture, a very open mixture, if I put that into a bucket of water and lifted it out, the water should go straight on through. The beauty of akadama is that the granules of Akadama hold water, and it is a most unusual clay. It's a fired clay, like volcanic clay, but the structure of it means that it holds so much water compared to any others alternative. There isn't an alternative to it at the moment because it's a finite resource, and they're starting to worry about how long will we have it. So alternative to that would be some John Innes with a lot of gravel, a lot of fine gravel. And in that way you get that circulating air and oxygen and water, you know. The idea, the whole thing about bonsai is the control of oxygen and water. Right, okay, so that's the Cotoneaster. And that's about maybe not worrying about trying to make it from seed because it's too long. Any other questions or anything that's raised for you? No? Okay, all right. Anyone else? Yes.
Well, how do you make the tray?
Well, that I make from resin. It's a necessity to some degree. One of the problems with bonsai is there's beautiful bonsai pots. That's not a particularly beautiful bonsai pot because that's still in training. All of these trees are in training. The best trees are in really expensive pots. An expensive pot for that would be about £70. That's about £30, something like that. So, and the problem is over here in Northern Ireland, because we're a small country and the market for pots is not exactly massive, we've got to go across to England or even further abroad for pots. And so I said, okay, well, let me just experiment and see what I can make with resin and clay and what have you. And so I made those myself just as an experiment, really, more than anything else. Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering, with the wiring, is it really necessary? And also, do you take it off at what point?
Yeah, good question. Good question. First of all, is it necessary? If you want to make a bonsai tree, you're going to be putting the tree under stress, right, to some degree initially. So you want the tree to get, every branch on the tree to get the maximum amount of sunlight. Because what trees in nature do, they throw out a branch and say, oh, that didn't work, and it drops off, you know. But we are, in a sense, godlike in that sense. We're having to do that for them. So therefore, you want the tree, the branches of the trees to make sure they're in the right position so that they give the most important health of the tree. At the end of the day, the health of the tree is the most important thing. A tree that's not healthy, you don't work on it. A tree that's not healthy, you've got to get it healthy before you do anything to it. So the first thing is, are the branches, are the leaves getting the maximum amount of light and energy? Because that's what drives the whole system. And then secondly, you've got the appearance, the artistic side of it. So that's why in terms of this branch, I could easily chop it off at that. But here I'm allowing that to grow down for a design bit. It's still very early days, of course. But so you've got that mixture between health and art, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense? All right. Any other? Yes.
Thinking about how long it takes to grow a bonsai, could you actually use fruit bushes, whether it's blackcurrants, gooseberries, and almost have a turbo bonsai?
Right. Blackberries, I mean, blackcurrants and whatever. You can do that with anything, right? I must admit, I haven't seen any blackcurrant bonsai. It's a novel idea. It's worth trying.
Last year, I actually planted maybe about 30 blackcurrants and gooseberries.
Yeah.
And they were basically just put straight into the soil.
Yes.
And they're actually all like micro plants at the moment.
Yes.
And I was thinking they look like bonsais. With this rapid way of growing them. So it started already, but I don't know whether it's going to work.
Take a note of this. It started in Northern Ireland.
I have a record of it here. It's on video.
No, I mean, you can do that with almost anything.
Okay.
And because what you're getting is you're getting that shape, which you've obviously seen. And The thing is about the flowers that would come out would be the normal size. The fruit, you'd probably have to minimize the amount of fruit. I mean, I have a number of apples. We talked about apples earlier on. I have crab apples and I have ordinary apples. So when the crab apple trees come out in March, they're just a blanket of white and beautiful flowers. Lovely. Keep those all on, because the flowers, even though the tree gets small, the flowers remain the same. Whereas leaves tend to, well, not in the case of Cotoneaster, they can't get much smaller than Cotoneaster, but leaves will reduce in size, but flowers don't reduce in size, which is interesting. So you keep those flowers on, but when it comes to the fruit then you need to take the stress off the tree. And it would be the same I would have thought with gooseberries, but it's well worth trying.
Well, I have micro gooseberries. I've never seen them so small.
Oh, right. So, oh, there you are. It could be a new variety. It started in Northern Ireland. It could be a new variety. Yes. Well, I mean, we joke about that, but it is amazing just what can come out unbeknown for people. You know, like that beautiful orchid, for example, that we saw on, you know, I haven't seen one that size before in a natural setting. You never know. So there you are. I'll take 5% of it. All right. So that's Cotoneaster. And the beauty of something like Cotoneaster is it's a very appreciative plant. It's not picky. It's not difficult. It's strong. It's a good grower. You've got flowers. You've got lovely berries like this, and as long as you can keep the birds off it, which is a problem, but I've got 2 pussycats who know that's what they keep an eye on, you see. So that is the Cotoneaster. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're getting there. Okay. This it's the hawthorn, yes. No. I know that you might not be able to see these all that well from that distance, but I'll take that away from. I don't want that to fall on your computer. Right. Now, I don't know what you can. I don't know how far you can see this. This is a hawthorn that's been recognized. And coming back to how would you get bonsais, I was driving past a farmer who was digging up his hedge, and there were 3 hawthorn trees in that hedge. Now this was one of them, and it would have been about 4 foot high. And he was digging them out with a digger, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to burn them." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take them off your hands." And so this is one of those trees. And what I did, first of all, you can see this long piece of wood here. I just chopped most of the top of it down. And then, and you can see this more later on when you come up close, I then started to cut this and carve this wood so that it looked like a tree that had been damaged by lightning, for example, and killed off in parts. And then this part starts to grow and what have you. So that's the story of the tree, and that will drop its leaves. Some of them have already dropped. That one has already dropped down, so eventually those will drop. And this has only really been worked on for about 5 years. But the feature on this tree is the deadwood. The deadwood is actually a feature rather than a problem, right? And so I took I think there was 3, no, there's 4 of them. I took the 4 of them off his hands. He was delighted. I just had to cut them off in the field to get them into my car and then get them back home. And they weren't always in that. They would have been in a larger pot until they were ready to, had some sort of bonsai shape to them, and then they were put into a pot. So those are 4 trees, and it's the history of the 4 trees that I've been thinking about. All right. I do have 1 or 2 large pines, but they would have trunks that were twice the thickness of that, and were a little bit impractical to get into the car to bring along today. So I've got a wide range, and you can choose what sort of size you want to work with. I mean, you may not want to work with trees that are very big, but you can then choose a smaller tree, and you've got bonsai pots. When you go to garden centres, by the way, most of them don't know how to handle bonsai trees. So just be cautious about what information you get on them. From a u3a point of view, I'm quite happy for you to contact me and ask any questions. But remember, every one of us is learning. I work with 6 other colleagues throughout Northern Ireland. And what we do is we go to each other's gardens and share expertise. And there are some of those colleagues who know a lot more than me. So we share that and we learn from each other. We try things out and what have you. So if you did take this up as an interest and you wanted some questions answered, I'd be quite happy to do that. You know? But I don't want to make it sound complicated, but it's like everything else. If it's a hobby, you want to know as much about the thing as you can. And that's really what I'm saying. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you have to take them out of the pots every so often to trim the?
That's a good question, because in Japan, that tree would stay in the pot for up to 10 years. It would stay in the pot until such times as the water wouldn't go through it, you know, because there was so much of root mass in there. I'm not recommending this, by the way, but that's what they would do, even if these were exhibition trees. And what they do then, they put a plastic collar around so that they can fill that plastic collar up with water to allow it to sink through the soil. Maybe it takes 15, 20, 25 minutes to go through the soil. So that's what they would do in Japanese nurseries. But of course, they have got assistants running around all the time, saying, you know, looking for every single leaf. I mean, you go to some of the Japanese nurseries, there isn't a leaf out of place in any of them, but they've got plenty of assistants going around checking everything. Normally, that tree has been in there for coming up to 3 years. I will probably not repot that for another 2 years. And the reason I would do that is I would take it out of the pot and start to sort out the roots and say, well, you know, you want the roots to be, to have as much room to develop small rootlets. It's the small rootlets that do the feeding. You know, if a bonsai root or if a tree root was from one end of the table to the other here, it would only be that sort of area that would really be doing the feeding. All of the rest is just to get it back to the tree. And we don't need that to be there. So you're going to take the large roots and you cut the large roots away, leaving the small micro roots. And that's why you would take it out. And it's interesting, when you do repot a tree, you see the burst of growth that it gives, because it's delighted. It's, oh, thank God, that pot was constraining me, you know, sort of thing, you know. So it's, but remember, every time you repot, you do put this tree through some stress. So it's interesting, going back, there used to be people who say, oh, repot your tree every 2 years. No, not a good idea. Very bad idea indeed, because it stresses the tree too much. And at the end of the day, as I said at the beginning, it's the health of the tree that is most important. And if that means you've got to be a bit more patient, then you've got to be a bit more patient. You know? Yeah.
So when you got the 3 or 4 trees from the farmer,
Mhm.
that one back,
Yes.
did you use the sphagnum moss method to get the growing bits that you wanted to grow?
No, that's another good question. Because what I did was, remember, having taken them out of the soil, they already had roots there.
Yes.
They were compromised, but they were there. So what I did was, I had big pots. In fact, a pot that was almost the size of that carrier bag type size pot. and put them into gravel with sphagnum moss broken up. I got scissors and just cut sphagnum moss, mixed it through the gravel, and almost in pure gravel, not quite, but almost. And it was in there for 2 years. Then I took it out and started to work on it to get it into a pot that size. But it was quite a long time before it got into a pot that size, you know. Yeah. All right, anything else? All right. Sure, you all know everything now about bonsai.
What about trimming them and restricting their growth?
Yes, the pot restricts their growth. That's the first thing. And that's the purpose of the pot, if you like, is to restrict their growth, because that keeps them small. And so you're talking about restricting growth. You said something else?
Well, it's restricting, pinching them out or
And pinching
stopping
them out.
the.
Right, okay.
Getting,
Now, if we look at this.
I mean, how will you stop that pine getting in?
Yeah, okay. That will simply be with a pair of pruners. And I'll select the branch, and I'll select the sub branch. Here, for example, I know you can't see it at the back there, but there is a nice branch here, but there's a little new branch came out this year, and it's just a little straight branch like that, not very strong, but I'll prune that back to 2 buds, and those 2 buds will then send out little branchlets. And when they grow out long, I'll prune them back to 2 buds. So all the time we're pruning them back to 2 buds, and that's what builds up this tracery, this fine tracery of branches. And it's the pot that really keeps them in control. So what you'll find is when you take the tree out of the pot, you'll sometimes find, not so much with a square one, but with the round one, you've often seen it with other plants. You take them out of a pot and the roots are going around like that, you know. Well, most of that, 80% of that will just be chopped off, because it's doing nothing useful except getting stuff from A to B, you know. Yeah.
What about the wind? Do you have to protect them from the wind?
Yes, I'm lucky in that I have got a shaded area against a wall. But the winds are the most problematical, because of pots at 30, 40, 60, 70 quid a time. It's the winds that really worry me at night, you know. So I'm out there saying, is that, you know, where can I put them? And sometimes that means put them on the paving or something like that. Yeah. But leaving aside the pots, yes, you don't want branches being broken. You know, you get a lovely branch, you know, you get something like that and it's exhibition standard, and suddenly wind blows over and you lose that branch, which happens, you know. And then there are exhibitions of bonsai. Sorry, there was one in Telford 3 weeks ago. So 6 of us decided to go. It was when the train strike was on. So 6 of us decided to go. We would go to Birmingham, and because the train strike was on, we'd get a taxi and take us down to Telford, right, and back again. Okay. So everybody arrived at the airport ready to go, except me. I got stuck in the queue and missed the flight, so I didn't get there. But they had a good day. But normally we would go to an exhibition in Belgium. There's a big exhibition, a big European exhibition in Belgium. So we'd go there and you see the most wonderful bonsais. One of the things I didn't bring with me today, and I meant to, was my tour of Japan and going around the nurseries of Japan. My apologies, I forgot to bring that with me today. But so there are exhibitions of bonsai, and even just from the point of view going, look at something absolutely magnificent and all the work that goes into it. You've seen other exhibitions of flowers and onions and all sorts of things, and you just see the amount of work that people put into these, you know. All right.
At Millennium Garden, I think it is a National Trust property outside Edinburgh at Balerno. There's a lovely garden with a bonsai section and
really?
a greenhouse full of them.
Right. Now that might be, yeah, I wonder who looks after the Scottish bonsai. In fact, I used to live in Edinburgh, but not at the time when I knew that garden, so I don't know. I know that the Scottish Bonsai Society did have, well, I'm in an ethical dilemma at the moment. tell you a story, but if you tell anybody else, I'm going to shoot you. The Japanese ambassador came over to Scotland many years ago. And because he had been told that there was interest in bonsai, and when he went back home, he arranged for a whole group of bonsai trees, top bonsai trees, to be sent to Scotland as a gift. Problem was that the Scottish Horticultural Society didn't know how to handle bonsai, but ego-wise, they couldn't admit that to anybody. The result was that the bonsais all died. Even though there was one of my mentors, a Scots friend of mine, was telling them, you know, look, you're not handling them properly. Oh no, we know what we're doing. We're horticulturists. We know what we're doing, etc. So they all died. The next stage was Robert looked at the pots and he said, these are wonderful pots. And he found that they had sold them off at £2 to £5 a time. And these were antique pots worth £1,000 to £2,000 a time. So just, as I say, I'll have to shoot you. But, you know, it's absolutely fascinating, just the lack of knowledge that's around about bonsai. Because it is a bit esoteric, you know, it's not everybody knows anything about bonsai, you know, but at least you'd think that they would listen to someone who did have a knowledge of it, you know.
That's the SNP report.
Yes, well, I should say, don't say that to anybody, but there you go. So, yeah, so there's a lot, there's more knowledge around now. Whenever I started, when did I start? When I was 21, 45. I started about 1963. And at that time, the British Bonsai magazine was a single sheet of A4 paper with a couple of sheets of A4 paper with staples in the middle. That was the size of the knowledge that we had in Britain, you know. But at the same time, the first bonsai trees that appeared in Britain appeared in the 1920s. And they were, a Japanese exhibition came over here, and those were the first bonsai trees that were seen in Britain, you know. But then there was a dearth until the 60s, and we started up again, you know. All right. So, how are we doing for time? Yes, sure.
Did the, when they've been around for so long in Japan, did the atomic bombs help or hinder or?
Oh, there would have been a whole series of whole nurseries just wiped out completely. And in fact, what happened, not because of, funny enough, not because of the atomic bomb, but in the 30s, there was a fire in Tokyo which devastated the center of Tokyo and took a lot of the bonsai trees out. And so what the bonsai growers did, they all moved out into what's called Bonsai Village, which is outside Tokyo. So I know that the atomic bombs weren't, they were Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they did that because of the fire in, I think it was 33, 34, something like that. So they all moved out of Tokyo. And whenever I went to Tokyo, it was easy just to be shown all around the bonsai nurseries there. Now, I don't know what happened in Nagasaki or Hiroshima, but there wouldn't have been anything left there at all. But widening, I suspect that underneath that question there is, would the nuclear fallout damage the trees? I haven't heard anything about that, so I don't think that was the case at all, you know. But trees are very resilient, you know. And even in Chernobyl, if we go to Chernobyl now, there is damage there to the habitat in Chernobyl. I don't know very much about it. So I think it would have an effect, but trees are fairly resilient, you know. Yeah. Anything else? No,
I think that brings the that part of the meeting.
Well, look, thanks for your attention, and thanks for the questions as well. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much, folks. Right, Barry, thank you. That was wonderful. Fascinating. I must admit, I find these here fascinating. The cats pictures made there. Wonderful. Right, there are some magazines and the plants over there for sharing, folks, if you want to be aware of that. Thank you, Verna and Carol, for doing the tea today and the buns. And, it was very nice. Thank you. And our next meeting is Monday, the 21st of November. So, by the way, is it okay, Kate, if I tell them that you're prepared to chair future meetings? Well, obviously, I'm told. But thank you. Yeah, Kate has volunteered to help chair the meetings. So that means we've got someone to chair the meetings. We have someone who is doing the administrative side, that will be Claire. I have myself doing the technical side. And if we'd one more person to help us with the planning, I mean, it's a combined effort. It would allow us. So we'll give a bit of thought to that. Claire, I'm sure we'll be in touch with you about that. But that's the meeting finished. Thank you very much. And Barry, we're going to put these trees back up in the counter there, so people can have a closer look. Thank you, and I'll draw the meetings are closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh.